Thank you. Thank you for stopping me there. All right. So if you missed what we went through already, up here at the top in the recording, we simply added in this form. We talked a little bit about the form choices. We have the URLs. We updated our views file to now include a much better vote function, which is going to allow us to pull in our form from a post of somebody submitting their information in the form. Excuse me. And then that's going to return a results section. And so that's what we just added in here was a results function. And then, of course, we need a results HTML. So if we go into polls, new HTML file, results. I did spell results, right? Yeah, there we go. Add that in, and we're going to go ahead and steal this code here. This will go inside your body. And in our title up here, we could put results if we want to. And if we look at this inside of here, we have a header that's going to display our text, display our choice out of what they chose, and then the detail if we want to send a link for them to vote again. All right. So now that we've got this updated a little bit here, we can bring up our project, go to our polls. And if we click on what is your favorite color, notice that we have this in a nice little banner wrapped, and then we could pick our choices. Remember that we don't have any choices right now, but then we can hit vote. And if we didn't select a choice, we're going to get that error message back, which we didn't select because we don't have anything set up for that. All right. Let's see here. So this last little part is setting up more generic views so that we don't have multiple ones inside of there. You can do this like right now. What we programmed is to make things really simple, really easy. You could also do it where it even gets shorter. And so we would adjust our URLs file for the project itself. And so we have polls, and we have our views, and we have our int. And so here, instead of doing our int question, we could also adjust these details as a view, and it will generate and create those in our view over here on the right, left-hand side. So we can adjust those particular URLs, and this will make it a little bit easier for it to calculate the individual paths. Make sure I get this in the right section there. There we go. And so you'll notice it's quite a bit more condensed, being able to bring up our views, detail results, or the results view as a view, and pop that up. And then we can simply adjust our views so that each one of these is now a class, and it can then pull back a particular template based on a given model. And so this is going to remove all the individual views that we had before. Notice how we had these little functions inside of here. We're now going to set those up as classes, and we'll be able to return those as a particular view. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and grab all of this. And this is just going to go up towards the top. So we can replace this all the way from index, our detail, and our results. So everything before vote, we would replace back. And again, what this is doing is setting up a generic view. You can pass it a model, and then you just pass it a template name, and it will go ahead and build those particular views based on that. Does anybody have any questions on the code so far? So again, if we check what we just did here, we may need to refresh here because we just built those out. So again, if we go to polls, there we go. All right, polls, we click on 3, we still get that. We're still going to get nothing there because we don't have any choices set up at this point. But our view will come back correctly based on what we've seen. All right, this next part here in 5 is going to set up some automated tests. This is very similar to what we covered in Flask. And so being able to set up automation of tests, why you should create tests, you guys can read that here. Sorry about that. Let's see here. Test will take you through. You can read all these different tests. For this case, what we're going to do is just leave the test out of here for the sake of our time here. But I encourage you to go through and build those into your final project. And you can build more comprehensive tests that are going to test to make sure that we inserted certain data and the data returns back correctly. For example, our timestamps. We can assert whether or not those are valid timestamps or not. All right. Let's go through here and get to 6. Okay, so the last little part here in 6, before we get to the last section of 7, this one's going to have us adjust our kind of look and feel. And so this is where we're going to update our CSS and some other static files that we have inside of there. So if we go into our polls folder here, we'll actually add static specifically for the polls folder. So if we put in static, all right. And you'll see this template folds it in here. Now, the static files finder, this is part of the original file settings. So if we go into settings, you'll see how the templates are then going to full in through the base directory, and it will go through. That's how it pulls in this inner templates folder. We also have the ability to do that for our static files. And so you'll see this static URL here. That's where it's going to pull it from the outside. And then it can also go a little bit further in when we add that inside of there. All right, so a couple files that we want to create inside of our polls. If we go to static here, we then have to create a folder inside called polls. And again, this seems redundant, but it's the way that it imports it in as a module with this init package. And so from inside polls here, we're going to create a simple style sheet. And in the CSS, we're going to call it style. Right, and this is just going to set things to green for links. And then if we go to our templates and our index, we want to go ahead and load that static. So to do that, up at the very top, under our inside of our head, we'll put in our load static, and that will load the static files there. In which case we can then reference to those. So if we link rel equals style sheet, href, and our static specifically, we're looking for polls and our style CSS. There we go. And that's closed out there, and then we can close our link section there. All right, so we should be able to refresh that, see if it pulled here. If we go to our polls, whoops, there we go. I close out here, link. Got an extra quote in here. There's the href. There we go. Let's see if I can refresh that. It should pull on our index style sheet. So let's make sure our style sheet's loading. Let's see, static pulls because mine type is texting null and unsupported. Let's go back. That should be fine. Details. Well, it's still not applying that CSS, and it looks like it's because of the CSS file it created. We're missing. Come back and take a look here, but it should pull from the static when colors is green. Check our console, refuse to apply static polls. Well, let's take a look. So what I thought is it looks like the URL isn't set up correctly to pull. Let's see here. Pull static, pull style. Well, there's nothing that we did wrong there. Anybody else seeing what might be wrong there? I'm drawing a blank as to why it's not finding that file. So we can check that. If we do a 127.0.0.1 pull slash static slash style CSS. Okay, if it doesn't like that, then we should be able to take out this first part. Yeah, that's part of the problem, is it's not able to find that original style sheet. I'm guessing that is a URLs or a settings. And the way the static files is being pulled in there is the problem. So go to here. Yeah. Go ahead, Classroom. Somebody in the classroom have a question?
It looks like the folder order is reversed, so it should be poll static instead of static polls. Is that what the code says? I think I saw it on top of the page.
Here. So this is coming from polls to static to polls to style.
Oh, all right. Never mind. If you scroll up, it was reversed somewhere up on the left. Yeah.
Up here.
Hey,
Maybe
Jason.
I'm just.
Yeah.
Hey, he's good. Did you check the chat? I think you need the URL for like static file name equals CSS. Okay. I don't know.
The static portion should generate that, but that isn't wrong. That's what this is supposed to do. I think the bigger problem up here is a static file or static files finder is not set up correctly in this version. Let's see here. Contrib.
Yeah.
Static files. And middleware. I don't think the static files is set up correctly. Yeah, it's using this, and that's not the right way to do that. Let's see here. Contrib static files is in our installed apps. Okay, that's there. Load static, static there. So URLs. This is there's another one with this media root, and that's the one I've done it before. Being able to set up static files for serving them out. Let's see here. Okay, this restart. Still getting a 404 on static polls. Style sheets, static poll style sheets. To our URLs. Still not serving that up like I would expect it to. Huh. Like I said, I got a feeling that it's not looking for the static file correctly, and that I actually ran into this in another issue in a different one. Let me pause my recording here. All right, so it took me a little bit to chase that down, but what it was is in my settings, at some point I had kind of demonstrated that with our debug set to false so that we wouldn't get error messages such as this one, that if we set debug to false, like I have over here on the right, and save that, and then reload this page, you would get something like this, that resource not found. If you're going through development, you have to make sure this false is set to true. And what that does is it goes ahead and serves up your static files with another engine that's kind of built into Django. And so if you're getting errors, like in this case, where the CSS file wasn't found, etc., make sure your debug is set to true. When you go to production, it's a little bit different. There's some extra things that you can do in order to serve those up. We'll talk about that at a later stage when you guys are actually going to full production. But for now, if you go here and then go to polls, you'll see that everything turns green, which means it was able to get our style sheet, and we get a 304, and that's working fine. Now, this 404 here is the background. That's because I just copied and pasted in the next section of the tutorial. Is anybody missing that part as to why that was happening? Okay, so again, all you have to do is just make sure your debug is set to true, and then it will actually pull the static files. For those of you that were watching me go through and do these little pieces here with the static files, I was kind of copying a production environment. That's why I was having to add all those different things in there. But we're good. So now that we have our style sheet, which is up here in the right spot, notice how we set this background image and for it not to repeat. And so for that to actually load, we would have to put that background image inside of there, right? Let's see here. We just need to take the tutorial. We're going to use a file named background.png, which will have a full background of going to polls and then images. So we create one called images, right? And inside there, we're going to have a background.png file. Okay. Now we can put whatever we want inside of there for this. They don't actually give us a background that we have to use for that type of thing. So say we go out here to Google, we do a background image, don't need any CSS, just some kind of background image. There we go, something like this. And we're just going to call this background and the downloads. And if we copy this up to our images up here, refactor, add, and then if you'll remember, this one was a JPEG, so we'll have to adjust this to do JPEG. There we go. Notice how everything kind of styles up and everything should work. And if we go back here and we refresh, we now have this background of this brick. Now, obviously, that's not the best one to use, but we do get some kind of background there in order for that to pull up. All right, so again, because we're using this static page, if we go to here, and if we go up to where we imported these in our style sheet, which is in our index here, this load static, and then this href static, these are only going to work for static files which end up not being generated by Django, like the style sheet. If we generate those from Django, then we would have to tell it where we were specifically going. All right. Last but not least, we need to be able to work with our admin site so that we can actually get choices up and running. So if we go out to our polls again, out here, and we go edit our admin file, I'm going to close some of these other ones up here so that we don't get lost. Okay. So you remember that we registered this question before, and all that really did was allow us to go out to our website. And if we went to the admin side, you can see that we have the ability to see our questions out here. And when we click on a question, it's the default question showing up here, just shows question object 1, 2, 3, which isn't very helpful. This is the actual question text for those questions. So to make that more helpful, bring this back over here where we can see it. There we go. We're going to need to adjust some of the admin stuff in there. So we have our question in here, and now we want to use our admin class. So we do a class question admin. We have an admin dot model admin. Oops. And then from here, we get to tell it what fields we want it to show up. So right now, if we look at our admin page that we just had up, you'll see right now, the only field that we see is our question. And that's really all that shows up. If we go back to our polls, you'll see the same thing as a whole. Whoops, I stopped it halfway, so it's broken. Let's just finish our tutorial and I kind of show that. All right, so we're going to set what fields are going to show up when we pull up this in the admin page. So if we set up pub date, and we also had one called question text, right? And then down here, when we register this, we need to register this with our specific question admin. Again, what this class does is it allows us to adjust certain things on how it's going to get displayed in the admin page. So right now, all we're going to do is just allow it to show these fields as opposed to that question text object that you saw before. So if we come in here and we refresh and we see our questions, notice how it should refresh here. We should be able to see. There we go. Stop and reload this. Should be seeing those fields on that screen there, actually. Try this. And we don't see it there. All right, well, essentially that's what it should adjust. So these are the fields that you see here. Actually, okay, this one's adjusting this style. It's not really what I wanted to demonstrate, but that'll work. And so now when we click a question, notice that the date published is the first thing that we see, and then the question text. So before this was flip-flops. Now we're specifying what order we actually want to see those fields in. We got to do an inline form to adjust the other ones. And that's what you're going to see here is these field sets. So if we go in here and adjust the field sets, do a field sets equals this one, we're going to do none. So it's fields. Okay, so we should have that one in, and then we have the end of our list here. we would actually remove our fields and make sure that I'm not missing anything in typos here. There we go. Okay. And so what did that actually do when we come back over here and we stop? I wasn't closing out my parenthesis. That's what was going on. We look back at our page and we refresh. Notice now that these are in blocked sections. So we have this first section up here, which is our question text. And then this field set has our date published. And we can actually modify how those are going to look. So we can group different fields inside of our question fields. We don't have that many within, what's in here. There's not a whole lot of information in there, but we can set up those field sets in order to display that in a much cleaner fashion. So again, here's what it was before, where it was displaying just those fields in the section that we want. And then here in these field sets, it groups everything together. Then we can add related objects. So in this case, we have those choices that we were talking about. So if we add our question and our choice, and notice how they try to do our imports in alphabetical order. So choice comes before question. That's one thing that you want to do. Same way down here at the bottom, we'll want to make sure these are in alphabetical order as well. And we will just do choice for now. Right. And when we set up just choice, when it comes in here, we look back at our page, home, and you see choices. And then if we go to add a choice right now, you're going to have all this different text. And if we want to format that to specifically pull from a certain question, then we could do it in that fashion. In this case, we're going to use inline comments, and this is a much better way of formatting that, structuring it. So pull this over here so you guys can see. All right. So in this choice that we imported in here, we'll do a choice inline. This will come after our question admin. We have our choice. Actually, it's before. So choice class choice inline. Admin dot stacked inline. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can set these up. The stacked inline is one that I use a lot for setting up an admin page, making it much easier to add things in. So we're going to do our model to our choice. An extra 3 means that when we first set this up, you have the first entry for a model or for a choice, and then we're going to tell it we automatically want 3 more on top of that. It should give us a total of 4 there. So we set up our model 3, and then if we come down here to our field sets, at the bottom, we have to register that inline from above. So we say inlines equal our choice inline. There we go. And now, let's refresh this here. Go out to our main page. Now to our question. You'll notice that when we click on a question, we have these choices immediately pop up down below. In this case, the 3 extra just gives us the 3. But now we can edit not only what is our question, but we can modify the choices that are specifically associated with that question down below. We can also modify the, the votes number down in there as well. All right. The votes number is probably not something that we want to modify in the long run. And so we would want to eventually edit that out. Now that extra that we had up above, up here, we could set that to something like 4, and it would give us 4 extra choices, right? So if we do 4, we come back here and refresh, you would see that we have 4 choices available to us right off the bat. Now, if I don't want that many choices, I can just X those off, and then I can save those changes or adjust those texts there as well. All right. You'll notice with the stacked line that we're using here that it stacks each one of these. If you wanted to have that inline in here, we call that tabular inline. And so all you have to do is come up here on your choice inline. Instead of doing stacked, you can do tabular. At which case, when we refresh, you'll see that these are going straight across now. So we can do our choice text, add our votes, and then we can decide whether or not we want to remove it or not. So it's all a matter of what you want it to look like, but there's lots of choices for building out the admin side of things, all right? Let's see here. We can customize the change list. So this is what I was talking about before that I thought was going to change first time. This is your list display. And so right now, if we go out to our homepage, you can see that when we click on questions, we still just see this type of information. Whereas if we go to our question admin and under our inline, we say we want to list display. And this will be a tuple. And we wanted to display our question text, followed by the publication date. And we can also say, we can order it by when it was published recently, which is going to be whether or not it was published recently. Which will do a field. Notice that that's not a field in our database, but it's something that will go ahead and allow it to look up as to what is displayed as recently. So we pulled it up here, go in the fresh and refresh this page. Probably did a typo somewhere. Well, let's see here. Let's display 2. I think we're missing our function here. Should be able to pull up when it was displayed recently, but let's take that out of there. Okay. Now, if we look at our Django page, you'll see that this is much more useful where we can see the question text and the date it was published over here on the right. And again, the tutorial is having you use this was published recently function in order to bring that in. Looks to me, you're going to have to bring that in by importing that in. So down here, yeah, published recently. So what we do is you can modify this display and you can do a function of whether that's there, and then it will calculate whether or not that worked correctly. So if we go to our models, such as here, and then our choice of question up here, we can add this content in. And so this is a function specific to that given model, which is going to, in the admin display, do our publish date, and then we can just describe that as published recently. It's going to run this function, and that's going to determine based on date time, if it was less than a day, that we would go ahead and say that that was true. So in order for that to work, though, we do need to import date time. So if we come up here at the port and we do import date time, that we should be able to get that. And our time zone, I believe, was being imported from our Django time zone import. Should have been a way that we can import that time zone here. There we go. From Django utils, import time zone. There we go. And that will grab us our time and then find out whether or not it was published in there. So if we go back to our admin and we do a was published recently, start our server.
Do we gotta do the parentheses for the function, open and close?
For which
And
one?
At the end of recently, we gotta put the parentheses.
It should be calling it based off a field in the model. I messed this part up, so it doesn't know what admin is. And that's because I forgot to import admin. That's why. So from Django.contrib for admin. You're right. So normally what this is doing is on this part here, this would be calling a function, right? And so we would
Right.
have to put those parentheses on that. However, when we call this individual trait from our question model, that is going to look back up here in the beginning. And if we are a part of the admin display, then it goes ahead and always runs this function by default. And therefore we'll have that variable available to it. Does that make sense, Sam?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, and it only does it when it's in an admin display. That's what that little decorator does there. So if we stop that, there we go. We refresh. Now we can see whether or not it was published recently. And so in these cases, you know, this was entries that we had 5 days ago. If we add a new question here, and say like, where am I now? We can do today and now, and then we can put our choice in here. Denver.
New Jersey.
Yep. So if we save those, then you can see that this shows up as published recently because this is our current time minus a day. So if it was in the same day, that it would show up there. All right. We would also want to have the ability to kind of filter these out. So up here, we can build out a filter for us that will allow us to filter based on the past days, times, all those different things. What's nice is Django builds that out automatically for us. So all we have to do is go back to our admin, and under this list display, we do a list filter equals pub date. And so we're going to sort based on our pub date. That. And so now if we go to our page and refresh, you can see that we get this filter, and this is already built into Django. So we can figure out the ones in the last day, past 7 days, month and year. It automatically sorts those without us having to pull dynamically from the database. That information is just filtered out. You can also clear all those filters. So really quick and easy to add filters. You can also write your own. If you want to be able to search for a specific question, we need to add in a search field. So if we do a search fields question text, question text, and these are the fields that you want to be able to search through. So when we come in here and we refresh, we'll now have this search option. And if I search for anything inside of here and I say color, it's going to filter out the ones that are sorted by the color. And then I could filter them out even further if I wanted to outside of there. So pretty cool text. If you go back here to the total, you can go back and pull them all up and add them in there. All right. If you want to adjust the Django look and feel even more, and you can plug different things in there, you can add additional templates and modify the templates that are in there by default. So if we go into our settings here and we go to our templates, there we go. And we have this DIRs section inside of here. What we want to do is have our app DIRs to true, which we do. Right. I don't know why this is curved off there. There we go. And that DIRs is going to allow it to look through our base template. and make sure that we're set up on our templates. And if we come in here, you can import our source files. And so what this is all doing is if you notice in our default header, we have like Django administration and some other things that are preset up by Django. If we come into here and go into our section of code here, I'm messing up here. Base site. So let's see. Go to templates, and we have our polls, cancel that. And we want to add our admin. And inside admin, we have our templates folder. Inside there, we're going to create our, whoops, I went one too far, I think. I did. Let's take that back out of here. We're going to create a HTML file called base. It's actually base site is what they want you to put. So we can modify that. Let's refactor, rename base underscore site. Okay. Under this base site, you're just going to block this branding, which is just going to, get rid of all the branding inside of there. Because we're just using this as a template, we can just copy and paste that in. And so if it's on the index page, it's going to go ahead and block the header inside of there. And you could set this up in the contributor on how to block the branding and do a bunch of other tutorials on how to set that kind of stuff up. So if we save this, we bring it up, Django admin, and we go to here. On up, and we go to our choices, our questions, and then our polls. It should be able to block this heading upside here. I'm probably not setting it up right. And or missing it. We have to tell it to use that site. We set up the template, but we got to tell it to actually use it. Okay. Anyway, that will allow you to edit the index page. So if you do index as opposed to the base HTML, you can edit that and you can adjust those variables. So there's an advanced tutorial here. I encourage you to kind of understand what this is. I'm not going to take you through it. The idea is that you learn how to build reusable apps, which is kind of like this polls thing that we did next. And then on this what to read, it's going to tell you how to get through your documentation and how the documentation is organized, how it stays up to date, understanding how to read this kind of stuff in between. So for you, what you're going to want to do is come out here to general index. Oh, sorry, it's just 4.1 documentation is where I want you to go. And again, this will take you through the different sections of everything that we talked about. And so if you have questions related to the model layer, this is going to be all the advanced things that you can look into. The view layer, if you want to do asynchronous support, that may be common. I know somebody was asking me questions on that here in class a while back. I think that was you, Nick, wasn't it? If I recall. I think so. Was setting up asynchronous and how you would do that inside of Django. Things that you can do with the template API, forms, development process. And so the last little thing is being able to deploy. And so you'll really want to review this section here so that you can deploy that out at the end and how we can keep track of how that works. So on deployment, there's a couple different things we have to do based on which type of server we use. So whether we use GUnicorn or UWWiz, this is the one that we recommended with Flask, or the one that at least worked at the end. where you can set up these individual files and how to run that. The biggest thing you have to do when you're deploying these is setting up your, you can do a check deploy, and that will make sure that you have all your configurations and your settings. Some of the ones that mess up all the time is going to be having your secret key in there, making sure debug is set to false when you're actually publishing, in which case you have to set up your allowed hosts on that side of it. So we'll work on this, and you'll have to end up doing that collect static command that you might have saw me do in the last one. That's going to collect all your files into a static root directory so that they can be served up from there. You may end up redirecting your static files, like your images and things like that, may go to, say, Amazon Cloud S3 bucket or the equivalent. And that's all possible within Django. And then, of course, you have much better caching if you use those kind of services instead. All right. If you're going to set up HTTPS, there's a bunch of different optimizations and stuff that we'll do in here. Now, for those of you that are going to use Django in your final project, we'll obviously walk through and do those in terms of a final deployment. On Thursday, I should be back in town for that. And if I am, then we will go ahead and walk through and do your next mini project, be kind of your final mini project here. If I'm not back, then we'll do it over a WebEx, or a Zoom here. But if we have any issues, I'll let you know here in the announcements. Anybody have any questions over what we got covered here today? All right, definitely finish out this tutorial and play with this admin stuff. Tweak things around, play with it, because when you go to use it for your project, you'll want to know it. Sam, did you have a question?
Yeah, if we can get a heads up about the project, maybe you can start trying to get our arms around it.
On the mini project?
On the next project, whatever the next
Yeah.
one is.
Yeah, we should have a mini project this week. See if it still lets me log in here. Did it kick me out? It kicked me out. So I think most of you got your other projects turned in here this last week, or needed a couple extra days. That's not a big deal. Same way with this one. It's not going to be due on Sunday. It'll actually be due the following Sunday. So you guys have an extra week to kind of work on it. Pull up the courses here. And so the mini project will pop up here once I have it up in there. And we'll post the videos for the recording. So I'll have part 3, part 4 here edited in, and then you guys can be able to pull that in. There won't be a part 4 for this because we'll actually just be covering the mini project. But yes, Sam, I'll try to get that posted up here, and I'll send an announcement out, and that will actually cover it on Thursday.
Great.
All right. Great question. Anybody else got any questions? All right, in that case, let's see. Could you see if the previous Django links worked from last week or uploaded? You're talking about the videos. Let me see if those got posted. They should have, unless I completely missed that. They did not. Thanks, Antonio. I'll get those videos up and posted there. I know I uploaded them to YouTube. I must have not got the links posted over here. I'll get that fixed. All right. Anybody else have any questions? All right, then. Look for an announcement on the mini project information coming out. And then on Thursday, we'll go through it. We'll walk through it just like we have the last couple ones, get you started, and then you can kind of go on from there. All right. We'll see you Thursday.
All right. Thanks.